Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Dopamine Collective. I'm Rhonda Essling, licensed therapist, late-in-life diagnosed ADHDer, and mom, struggling to figure it out right alongside you. This is a space for women who get it, the struggles, the wins, and everything in between. Let's get into it. Today I'm going to set the scene. Picture this. Your kid is pitching a great game. Yeah, there's some ups and downs, as there typically is. Consistency is a tricky part of this. But they're pitching great, and then they field a grounder that comes right back at them. They make the throw to first. One of the parents next to you who coaches older kids makes a comment, "I can't believe she made that throw. She was facing clear the other way. There's no reason she should have been able to do that." You're cheering, everyone's cheering, and she has the biggest smile on her face. 2 innings later, she gets called at first for an interference. She doesn't even really understand what that is or why she got called for it, and you can tell. After the inning's done, she comes into the dugout, flops down, and maybe there's helmets getting thrown, maybe there's muttering frustration or venting to the coach. Maybe you even hear a little voice from one of the other players saying, "Why can't she just get past it?" Or "Why can't she shake it off like other kids?" This is what today's episode is about. So we're going to be coming back to this scene, and I want you to hold on to the fact that it was never about the interference call. And that's what the next 20 minutes are going to be about. You're listening to the ADHD Dopamine Collective podcast, where we share stories of a generation of women who were often overlooked and are now finding out they have ADHD in adulthood, where we provide expertise and resources to navigate this new journey. Hi, my name's Rhonda Essling, your host, licensed therapist and ADHD coach, later in life diagnosed with a couple of neurospicy kids at home. The story I shared at the beginning of the episode is sort of a compilation of a number of different situations that I've experienced during youth sports with my kid, whether it's my kid or someone else's kid. But it's really reflective of this relationship between sports and activities, which generally speaking, research says are really good for neurodivergent kids. And then all the other things that make their way into that experience that actually makes it really hard. And this is for the parents of neurodivergent kids or parents who were themselves that neurodivergent kid in the dugout, really struggling and not understanding why. Today, we're going to start with what I think we all have heard and are generally aware of, and that is that sports are good for neurodivergent kids and neurodivergent brains. And the research actually does support this. Physical activity gives kids small to moderate improvements in ADHD symptoms, executive functioning, and emotional regulation. So even 20 minutes of physical activity can help sharpen focus and executive function short term for these kids. So that's real and it's worth doing, but it's a moderate help. This isn't a total game changer. See what I did there? This does help these kids, but it's not the kind of impact that will completely change their functioning. So sports can support treatment, but it doesn't replace it. Ultimately, these kids are probably going to need other supports, whether it's medication, therapy, occupational therapy, accommodations in school or at home. Sports is not the end all be all of what is going to help these kids be able to function better in their day-to-day life. So the moment itself is regulating. You make a good play in a game or at practice and you get that praise and your teammates are cheering for you and it feels really good to push yourself and to see the rewards of your efforts. And that's a piece for a lot of these kids, the confidence boost, the ability to push themselves and challenge themselves physically and see the reward. That is truly a benefit. For some of these kids, it may be the only time all week that they feel like they can just let go and be themselves. And that's the piece that I feel like the research is kind of missing the point on. So in my house, this is a kid, being able to be a leader, being able to be their loud cheerleading self or Go all out, no holds barred, right? Where you get to see this version of your kid that's not welcome in a lot of spaces. And that can be a benefit. There can be a lot of acceptance and inclusion that comes with the experience. It also gives direction. If you have a sensory seeking kid, this is a way to direct that energy to actually something that feels productive that they can build confidence around. So here's where the hard part comes in. And that's the dugout and the executive function nightmare that sometimes can be. So the in between is where this breaks down. And I'm going to use the softball analogy as we go on, but this really can relate to a lot of different sports and activities. The waiting, the switching roles in between different innings, the transitions, waiting your turn, having to remember complex plays or step-by-step instructions. Maybe it's keeping yourself regulated when you're not actively having to focus and pay attention. These are things that actually can make sports really hard for kids, right? The emotional regulation that's required during the downtimes, the in between. Maybe a kid is sitting on a bench for an inning or two and having to switch gears without knowing what to do. And as I said in my earlier example, recovering from a mistake can be really challenging when you have to switch gears quickly or you have time to ruminate on it and don't have access to the resources to help you move through. This could be just feeling stuck and not having anyone to talk it through with that gets it. Your parents are way on the sidelines. They can't jump in and help, right? You're kind of in it yourself. And it might be such big emotions that it doesn't feel like you can put it away for the rest of the game. So the meltdown that happens on the bench isn't bad behavior. Oftentimes it is a collision of the setting and the lack of executive functioning and emotional regulation available. And sometimes this can make it so that sports aren't exactly the best environment for these kids to thrive. So research kind of also splits the types of sports and which type of sports are better for neurodivergent kids. So on one type, the reactive open play, this would be soccer, basketball, softball, baseball, where you are reacting to what's happening in the moment. You are having to be engaged. This can sometimes help build executive functioning, right? All the different steps, the way you hold on to the information. Those kinds of sports are considered better at building executive functioning. Whereas the more repetitive, you're doing the same thing over and over again, maybe it's rowing, running, these are typically better at symptom reduction, right? They're different tools and they help in different ways. So there's really not one sport that's better or worse. Also, fit matters. No one ADHD kid is the same. I love that Katie Sora says, if you've met one ADHDer, you've met one ADHDer. We all have vastly different brains and nervous systems. This is something I noticed when my kiddo was really young, that running was actually dysregulating for her. She's a sensory seeker. And so running around would actually spin her up. I would often get oh, she just needs to wear herself out. She just needs to go out and run it off. And that kind of unbridled running chaos, she would come back even more dysregulated than before. So knowing your kid is also what's going to guide decisions that you make about what sports and activities to put them in. So I got to the point with my kiddo where I was not going to put her in soccer. I was not going to put her in basketball, those kind of sports that require a lot of running all over the place. I knew probably were not going to be a good fit regulation wise. And that was my goal, was regulation. So some sports are also go, 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 right? And for my kiddo, that would not be a good fit. They need recovery moments. They need a beat to reset, to remember to slow down. They need to come back to baseline, and the constant motion isn't going to do that for them. Another way that you can make decisions about whether a sport or activity is what's best for your kid is watching the coaching. Are the coaches running practices nonstop? I tell this story about a volleyball tryout my kid was at, where it was go, 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 the whole tryout. And they were just like barking orders and corrections, and my kid couldn't take it in. It was one of the most dysregulating environments I've ever seen them in. And so noticing the coaching and how that kid is responding to the coaching, she couldn't take it in. And that wasn't going to be a good fit for her. We needed to find something else. So another piece of this is, even if research says, this sport is good for this sport is good for this, knowing your kid is going to be the best determining factor for what sports or activities you choose for that child, right? Again, with the running and the soccer, I knew that wasn't going to be a good fit for my kid, even though a lot of ADHD kids really thrive in that environment. It's great for them. With my kid in particular, I knew it wouldn't be. Also, some of those kids really thrive in that go, 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 go. It keeps them focused and laser sharp. I know with my kid, that's not the case, right? So knowing your kid is always going to be more important than what the research says is best for their brain. So before you commit to an entire season, it's really best if you're able to watch a practice, have your kids try it out, see how they do in that situation, see how the coaching is and how the coaching is working for them. It'll give you a lot of information and feedback about whether or not that sport or activity is helpful to their emotional regulation or executive functioning, or whether it actually might be more harmful. Because the reality is, some of these environments could be more harmful to your kiddo's functioning than helpful, depending on various factors. And we're going to talk through more of these as the episode goes on here. All right. So one of the pieces that is really important to talk about too is that sports and activities eat up our evening time. It eats up our kids' evening time. We often can't have regular dinners. I joke so frequently about, if you're a sports parent, you're either eating at 4, you're eating at 9, right? It feels like there's no in between. You're busy with obligations. And the weekends might be taken up by tournaments, having to travel, not being at home in your own environment. Before you commit, make sure that you actually know the level of commitment that you're committing to. Neurodivergent brains need time to recover. The burnout cycle is real. This is one of the hardest pieces for me about parenting neurodivergent sporty spice kids, is knowing how to protect them from that burnout cycle, but also have them in environments that have effective coaching and opportunities for them to grow and focus and pay attention. Not just do they need downtime, they need unstructured, low demand time. This is essential. And even as adults, we know this. We need time where there are no demands on us or our nervous system in order to recover. It's a really common piece of the experience that many women with ADHD have. So the burnout cycle is real for kids too, right? When they don't have enough unstructured time where there are not a lot of demands, then they'll go through periods of really high functioning and then not functioning much at all. And as a parent, it can be really tricky to navigate when it's okay, how it's okay to let them take a break, or set different expectations around level of commitment and what that means as far as decisions with their sports and activities. So you can also let the commitment dictate the decisions that you make about their sports and activities. We have rec ball, we have travel ball. In the Midwest, we have club, but that's not much travel. When it comes to club sports, things can look very, very different. I often talk about how club sports now feel like the equivalent to what rec ball was when we were kids. But it's okay to make a decision to put a kid in rec ball, not because they're not good enough, not because they can't hack it or don't want to play at a higher level, but because you are managing their time and nervous system. And you're making a decision to have less commitment because, bigger picture, it's going to be protective in the long run. And you, as a parent, get to decide when too much is too much. You can opt a kid out, even if it's a team sport. It's okay to give them a mental health day. Their functioning, their mental health, mental well-being is more important than any practice game tournament, if it truly is getting to a point where your kid is getting crispy, that's what we talk about in my house. You're just feeling crispy and you need a break. It's going to be better in the long run that they can communicate that to you because they're noticing it in themselves. Or maybe you're noticing, like, hey, I don't know that you're doing great. Do you think you need a night off? You are helping them start noticing. How many of us are so bad at noticing the buildup that we don't even know we need a break until we hit full burnout and cannot function? So this can serve as both a way for us to teach our kids how to notice when they need a break and teach them how to take it, but also teach us that it's okay to do that and advocate for our kid and stand up for their mental health being more important than any sport or activity. Because at the end of the day, that's the truth. It doesn't matter how much time, money, life commitment you have into any sport or activity, your mental health is more important. And I think more and more we're seeing that on bigger stages, but we need to model it for our kids on this level. I also want to acknowledge that making that call is hard as a parent. A lot of things come up for, I know me personally, my husband certainly, him and I have had a lot of conversations about what is important and how to prioritize. We grew up in a time where if you had practice, you had practice. If you didn't go to practice, you sat on the bench, right? There were consequences to not following through with expectations when it came to your team. There was a lot of guilt and shame used around letting that team down. You were supposed to look past your own needs for the good of the team as a whole, right? We grew up with all of these ideas and pressures that we have carried into parenting. I remember really vividly the first time my kid looked at me and was like, Mom, I don't want to go. I can't do it. And the reason I remember it is it was a league game. And I knew she was burnout. I knew she was struggling. She was exhausted. It was too much, right? And it was still so hard for me to give her permission to stay home because I felt like I was teaching her not to push through. I was teaching her that it was okay to let people down that needed her. She's a pitcher, right? She's a big part of the team. And I was saying, no, it's okay for you to miss that. That was really hard. My own inner critic really struggled with it. And I know a lot of other parents have experienced that self-doubt around, am I doing the right thing? When should I push? When should I hold back? When should I teach to take care of yourself? And when should I push, distress tolerance? It's not an easy thing to navigate. I'm going to have an entire episode about sort of the parent side of these dynamics coming up, where we're going to go more into being a neurodivergent parent, navigating these things to support our kids. So I'm just going to put a pin in that. There is more coming on this topic because it is a really big piece that we often just try to push through. So what can help aside from reacting when it gets bad is scheduling in downtime, right? We know that our kids need breaks and we're going to schedule that downtime like it's a practice. We're going to protect it at all costs, ensuring that they have what they need. And different batteries need different amounts of downtime. There's no one size fits all for this. It may be that your kid needs one night a week off. It may be that your kid needs Thursdays and Fridays not to have anything because that long week of school is enough to just completely drain their battery. You have to be attuned to your own kids and what works for them as far as giving them the breaks that they need and recharge. So another piece of what makes sports really tricky for neurodivergent kids is the social side. This can also be a situation where both exist at the same time, right? On the one hand, your kid is a part of a team. There's a level of acceptance. We're all working together. You learn that everybody has a role, and those are different roles. And not everybody's the star, but everybody is a part of the team, and they're an important part of the team, right? And that can be a huge confidence boost for kids. Also, there are prescribed roles for different positions, for different sports and activities. There is a playbook, right? When you are in this role, this is what you do. I have seen my kid as a catcher basically be the quarterback of the team, right? Be able to direct people, tell them where the runners are, where the play is at, how many outs. And she has a role. She knows what that role is. And there's a lot of confidence that comes from having clarity around how to show up in that space. You also know that if you're doing it wrong, you're going to get a correction, and everybody's corrected, right? It is a mistake heavy environment. There's not as much pressure on perfectionism. It's not a one and done kind of thing. Some kids absolutely go the perfectionistic route when it comes to sports, but generally speaking, there is this attitude of mistakes are part of the learning process when you're in sports. But a team can also be an unscripted, fast moving environment to navigate. There's banter, there's teasing, there's, cheering, there's being too loud, there's being too quiet. Some kids need more hype, some need less. And there can be targeting, there can be competition. Kids sort of pitted against each other for similar roles or positions. And these kinds of social dynamics can be really tricky to navigate for neurodivergent kids, especially if there's any rejection sensitivity in the room. So a lot of neurodivergent kids, would hold on to things that another kid might shrug off, right? It might not be that serious. It might be a joke or a tease. But because of rejection sensitivity that kiddo is holding on to, it is much harder to just brush that off and move on, because it's hard to know, and that inner critic is going to take it to the most negative place. So this can turn the volume up on many of the dynamics that are happening on the field. It can also cause emotional dysregulation as a kiddo is trying to figure out how to interpret things and how to navigate different situations. This can also be true, especially if these kids play with other kids from school and things sort of bleed back and forth from school to the sports and activities. There are tricky social things that find their way into both of those settings. It can be hard to turn that off. So what helps is coaching the recovery. Coaching the recovery of the social miss. Maybe they missed a cue. Maybe they took something literally or seriously that was a joking banter that happens a lot in sports. I recently coached my kiddo through a team taunting her pitching from the dugout, and she was getting really upset. And coaching through that, they're going to continue to do it if it's working. They're trying to get in your head. This is part of sport. I don't know that I got through. That was a really hard one to teach an 11-year-old with RSD, right? Like, I don't know how to get that through. But being able to coach in these moments and also preparing the coaches to be able to coach through these moments can really help. So also protecting their belonging. So a team that accepts your kid, we talk in couples therapy. In my therapy practice, I've seen this myself, where attachment wounds are healed through secure attachment, right? Some of the tricky social navigation environments, situations that come up can actually be worked through in this sort of team and belonging setting. And if you look at it that way, right, that this team could be a therapeutic tool to work through things and figure things out that are hard and occur in other spaces of your kid's life, this could actually be a really helpful pivot for them and for you. But the key is making sure that they're on a team that can hold that space for them and continue to maintain the belonging. And it's not always easy to know when you're trying out or picking a program or picking a team. Prioritizing that, though, can actually make this a really successful environment to navigate tricky emotional and social dynamics. So here's the piece we don't talk about much, and that is watching our kids struggle socially, feeling left out, feeling targeted or ostracized actually brings up a lot for us as parents, especially who are neurodivergent ourselves and maybe even have our own rejection sensitivity. This can be physically painful. This can be really dysregulating and make it difficult for us to co-regulate our kids through these environments. I want to name it and also give yourself permission to just sort of notice what comes up when you see your kids strike out or really struggle and not be able to come back. Or maybe you hear a parent talking about them or you see some tricky dynamics happening on the field. It's entirely possible that parts of you are being really activated by what's happening on that field too. And again, I'm going to circle back to we're going to be talking more about this in the parent side of all of this equation episode because this is a piece of navigating youth sports too, is that it doesn't just affect our kids. And it's important that we acknowledge that and make it a part of the conversation because you being able to regulate your kid is also a really important piece of all of this. And that may be really difficult in some of these settings. So we're going to talk about this more in the future, but I wanted to name it here as well. Okay, so the takeaways, what actually helps? I'm going to break it down for you. Naming the things that are tricky about the activity or the sport with your kid, not ignoring it and reacting when they come up, but being able to proactively name what's tricky about being in the dugout, what's tricky about navigating the social situations. And then when it's not a surprise, like it ambushes everybody that this is all of a sudden hard, right? We can anticipate it's going to be hard. And then we can come up with a plan how to navigate it. So here's what you're going to do when you strike out. Here's what you're going to do when you feel stuck. Not just the like calm down. And this is an interesting one because I'm raising a neurodivergent pitcher. You can't just say slow down. You need to slow it down. You need to like regulate your body, right? Like, okay, if I could do that, I'd do that. But having a routine to reset, that's the game changer, right? You acknowledge there are going to be moments that you get going too fast, that you're having a really hard time dialing it in, that you're getting frustrated, the other team's getting in your head, whatever. You don't just tell your kid to ignore it and move on. You say, here's what we're going to do to reset. You're going to you're going to walk around the mound. You're going to wipe your hands off. You're going to move the ball, whatever it might be. And again, I'm talking softball, but this is any activity, right? What is your reset routine? And then once you come up with a plan, you advocate to the coaches. So you frame it not as an excuse, but what works best for your kid. My husband, before my daughter's game last weekend, broke down 3 things that while she was pitching were the focus. These 3 things, and he kept it really simple. I'm not going to lie. I forgot what they were because we were dividing and conquering that day. So I had to text him and he let me know. And I went up to the dugout and let the coaches know these are the 3 things that will help her remember what she's working on, how to reset, and what she needs to do. So having a plan and then advocating for the coaches about how your kid functions best or what they need to be at their best is a very different conversation than making excuses for why they're struggling or why they're behaving the way that they are, because it actually feels helpful and productive to be able to go to those coaches and say, here's the plan. This is what we've been working on. And this is how we're trying to, interact with something different. And then we're going to protect the things that are going right. We're going to continue to celebrate and bring focus to the things that are growth, right? I just noticed that this thing that used to be so much more challenging is going way better. You've worked really hard on that so that the hard doesn't poison the entire activity. Right. And maybe it is the friendships they've made. Maybe it is the way that they've learned how to be a leader on the team or show up and help coach other kids through things that they've gotten pretty good at. And now they can show other kids how to do it. There are lots of things that you can celebrate that are happening on the court, on the field, wherever, that aren't about wins and losses, aren't about moments of not making mistakes, but are celebrating strengths. And these can be the things that build resilience in those settings, as opposed to allowing your kid, and I know once they get into a negativity spiral, it can be hard to break it, but to continue to focus on the negatives and have that be the tone of the entire activity. So I'm going to leave you with this. The sport, it's probably good for your kid. And some of these other dynamics may be really hard. And the wrong setting, the wrong sport or environment may actually cause more harm than it does good. Does that mean you throw everything out? No, absolutely not. It means be mindful about the sports, the activity, the level of commitment, the burnout cycle, the emotional regulation, executive dysfunction, needs and accommodations that would support your kid in different environments. This isn't easy to do. Like, navigating all of this is so hard. But I think there is this idea out there that sports are good for neurodivergent kids. Period, full stop. And it may be that you're in a situation wondering why it doesn't feel that way to you. And I want to just name that and normalize that experience as well. So there is going to be a part 2. I know I've mentioned it a couple times here, where we're going to talk about how parents show up, not just to support their kid in these spaces, but with the executive functioning and emotional regulation demands of navigating youth sports, club, travel ball, how that has changed, again, from when we were kids. And there's real research that supports that the monetization of youth sports has vastly changed the demands on parents and schedules and financial over the years. So I'll be sharing the research around that. And as a parent with neurodivergence, we're going to talk a lot about navigating all these things, the shame that we feel and the rejection sensitivity we feel, also the self-doubt, questioning around, are we making the right choices when it comes to supporting our kid? So if you want more information on neurodivergence, the science of neurodivergence, or even just to learn about how to better support your system so you can better show up in these environments and make these decisions, check out my website. Many different aspects of executive functioning. It is the manual I wish I had available when I was diagnosed. 5 25 to 30-minute videos with pretty extensive workbooks where you can actually take the information and apply it to your real life in order to help figure out how to better understand your brain and nervous system, as well as build systems and environments that better serve you. So check that out. There'll be a link in the show notes, or you can go to my website at rhondaessling.com. Otherwise, please share if you know someone who would be helped by this episode or even validated from some of the challenges that we've discussed today. And if you could rate or comment, review on the podcast, that's how other people find me as well. I will see you next time when we talk more about being a parent with neurodivergence, navigating youth sports. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If this episode hit home for you, share it with someone else who may need to hear it. And come find the rest of the conversation. All of my links are in my Linktree / Rhonda Essling ADHD coach. I'll see you next time.